Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie Moab Investigation, Part 6. Assistant Chief Palmer Interview Notes. Questions are in regard to your phone call conversation with Officer Pratt while he was on scene with the domestic violence incident between Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. There will also be questions regarding report approval process as well as any other knowledge you may have as it relates to this case. When you met with Officer Pratt while he was on this scene, did you record your conversation or was there anyone else around that heard the conversation? It was not recorded, and if anybody was there, I don't know, potentially my wife. She was the only person around. He stated he was actually home on paternity leave when he received the phone call. Number 2. Officer Pratt called Assistant Chief Palmer and gave a brief synopsis of what happened and said he told Gabby there was nothing he could do as it was all written in statute. Officer Pratt: the last thing I can do is call a supervisor where this is such a minor. This was like a slap fight and injuries from like a fingernail. I just don't know if it's worth the whole domestic thing or not. If it's going to get us in trouble if we don't do it this way. And Chief Palmer says, no, I don't. To that, I do not remember. I don't know if I really have much of a response to that. I'd imagine based on Officer Pratt's response on 3, we probably had a brief conversation on the two parties' willingness, obviously, to cooperate, and if there was interest in charges, or not. If they were willing to separate, I know that was part of our conversation. After I received the synopsis, I think it's important to note that my initial is. Officer Pratt is a seasoned officer. He has more years experience than even I do. I refer to him state statuses, look at the code, see what fits, and then our policy as well. Number 3, Officer Pratt: well, they don't want to, but unless I get some kind of permission some other way, we have Palmer. Probably would have said yes. They should be separated, but that again, I would refer to state statute and policy as far as making a determination. I've never seen a supervisor that tells somebody to do this or do that, especially when I'm not there. Call me, I'm probably just going to err on the side of policy and state law, right? Number 4, Officer Pratt: as far as the domestic assault charge, what do you think about that? Assistant Chief Palmer: kind of the same thing. I'm not there. Review state law and policy and make a determination based on what you're seeing and what you think. Number 5, Officer Pratt: well, Assistant Palmer: I did what I would have responded to. Number 6, Officer Pratt: do thing or not? Chief Palmer: don't know what I would have responded. Number 7, Officer Pratt: but is there a way of being like this? It's so minor. Assistant Palmer: I would imagine we did have a conversation about the injuries and that they were minor and that it sounded like a tough decision to make, but that they're the ones on scene. I'm not. Officer Pratt: it's hard to say, right? Officer Palmer: Number 9, Officer Pratt: I'm going to go reread you and just see if it fits or if there's a way it doesn't. And if I can find a way that because it really is, the spirit of the law is being lost on this one. It really is. So let me see what I can find. And if nothing else, then we'll have to separate them, whether she likes it or not. Officer Palmer: I said, yep, that's what I would do. Read the review statute and policy and make a decision. Number 10, I told him that Officer Pratt talks to Officer Robbins and tells Officer Robbins that Palmer told him that if it fits, it fits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Palmer: that's right. Number 11, what is the report approval process with the Moab Police Department? This situation So you have Officer Robbins, who is on field training, and Officer Pratt, who had been a field training officer. Ideally, the field training officer takes a look at their report before it is submitted. They go over it. The report is then submitted and comes to the first line supervisor, which you know is generally a sergeant. We were in the middle of a promotional process, a little bit different. From there, the supervisor, the first line supervisor, reviews the report. If correction need made, they reject it back to the officer if no corrections need to be made, and they felt that the report was complete. They would then approve it, and it goes to our records. They do some reviewing there, as well as then obviously, if it's an active case, it would go to whichever attorney it needed to go to. If not, then it is closed and no action was taken on it. Then that's it. Number 12. I ask what type of review records does on the reports. Records reviews and reports for completeness as far as are all of the boxes filled out and linking it to any other reports be. Number 13. I ask if the highest up the reports are reviewed for content is with a sergeant, and he confirmed this is as accurate FTO and or first line supervisor, which is a sergeant. Number 14. Do officers have access to body-worn camera video when preparing case reports? Yes. We run Axon. So if you're out and about, you have access through the app. Axon has an app so you can review it prior to it being uploaded to the server. Otherwise, after it's uploaded to the server, they would still have access. Are you aware if there is any body-worn camera footage of the contacts with the witness? Not that I'm aware of, there's not. And that would be the initial response to the Moonflower. I said yes, the initial response to the Moonflower, and then the follow-up to get the statement. He said not that he was aware of. Did you ever see any of the photographs or the injuries or the driver's license that was taken by Officer Robbins? I did not. Number 17. Moab Police Department have victims pamphlets to hand out for domestic violence cases. For domestic violence cases, yes. Number 18. Do you have anything that you would think was important to add? I don't think so. The body camera video shows kind of the gist of our conversation. And like I said, I'm on paternity leave, and so I wasn't wholly, but ultimately, my recommendation was to review the state statute and policy, which is exactly what happened, that they looked at the code and made a determination. Officer Daniel Robbins interview notes. How many years of law enforcement do you have, and how long have you been with the Moab Police Department? 5 months. FDO ended at the beginning of September. Probe last for a year. Did you have access to your body-worn camera and dispatch call information when preparing court? Body cam, yes. I didn't have the 911 call or anything like that. Well, what dispatch notes? I don't recall. What system do you guys use? So on FatPod, are you able to see the dispatch notes? Some, not all notes get posted. Not all things are put in there. We can't click on a link and hear the 911 call or anything. Did you review your body-worn camera prior to or the time you were preparing your report? I want to say yes, but I can't tell you yes for sure. I don't remember. It's about 3 months almost. How many calls are you aware of that were made to dispatch regarding this incident? Just one. How many witnesses are you aware of regarding this incident? Did you speak to any of them? One witness I was able to make contact with. Wasn't sure of last name. I found out later, the witness I thought was a 911 caller was not. And so I'm going to say 2. How were you notified of this incident? Dispatch, online report system, etc. radio traffic. You remember the general information that came out? Active domestic. Both parties in vehicle right off of 100 North onto Main Street. They were headed north. They had a license plate and a vehicle description. In your report, you state that we observed Brian and Gabby arguing over a phone. Did you investigate this further by speaking with Brian or Gabby about it? No. What he saw, if I recall correctly, that they were having a verbal dispute and he saw the aftermath to them getting into the vehicle. He wasn't sure exactly what was being said. In your report, you state, witness observed Gabby climbing into the van by the side window. When and to who did witness report this specific information? To me on the day that I got his handwritten statement. The content of the written statement, was that recorded? I really don't recall off the top of my head. There's a chance that it was, though. I went on a long drive out to his house to go speak to him, but I also know that I was there for a long time. I really don't recall. Would that be something to be access to if it was recorded? Yes. As far as contacts you have, as part of your job, is something you would do or required to do is activate the camera. That's something I normally do. So you state witness said he was not entirely sure what it is that he had seen, but feared the worst. You collected a witness statement from witness that explained a lot of what he said he observed. What exactly was witness referring to when you put in your report he was not entirely sure what he had seen? Something that he said is he was concerned about it being a human trafficking type of thing. He was really wishy-washy about it. He wasn't sure if it was a couple of kids having a verbal argument, if it were, it went from best case scenario of the situation, of course, of somebody having a verbal argument to worst case scenario. So he was worried about it being the worst case scenario. I clarified that witness wasn't sure about the big picture or circumstances of the incident, but was sure of what he actually saw physically. Yes. So in your report, you state that Brian got into the van and Gabrielle had gone into a manic state. What is your understanding of what that means, and how do you know she did this? They are not in the right state of mind, aren't doing things that people would normally do, like crawling through the driver's window across her boyfriend, and he said that she had kind of in and out of those states throughout the last few days due to those arguments. The way he described it to me was that was the set of mind that she was in when she climbed into the car. So as far as stating that she went into a manic state, was that something Brian actually said, or is that something you concluded? I haven't sat down and watched my body cam. I don't remember. I was also still on FTO and not very good at writing reports, so I'm probably guilty of possibly putting speculation in there. In your report, you state, Brian said Gabrielle, thinking he was going to Moab without a ride, went to slap him. As Gabrielle started to swing, Brian pushed her away to avoid the slap, and as a result, Gabrielle, but still, caught Brian's face with some fingers, causing some minor visible scratches. Do you recall what the actual information was that was provided to you by Brian? No. The reason I asked this, I reviewed the video in its entirety 3 or 4 times and took notes as I was going through. And it's the reason I asked the last question was I never heard him say anything about her being manic. And as far as Gabrielle being scared that he was going to leave her in Moab, I haven't been able to find anything. I heard him say that he was worried about her leaving him, but I haven't seen, well, I mean, I might have mixed those things up. As far as the act of how these scratches happened and about her starting to swing and Brian pushing her away and she being off balance, and that's all things too I haven't heard. I got the injuries are there are swinging or whatever, but as far as the story of how it happened, I haven't been able to see that. I was trying to piece it together because their stories were all over the place, as I'm sure you saw. They weren't actually, this event happened, that happened. It was, this event happened, and then 20 minutes later, this event happened, and then 3 days ago, this event happened. So I was trying to piece everything together. In your report, you state, I observed some small scratches to Brian's right arm, and when I asked him about them, he supposed they must have happened when Gabrielle was trying to get his attention about me being behind them with my lights on. This, however, was not consistent with Gabrielle's statement, her confused and emotional state. What exactly was not consistent with Gabrielle's statement? If I remember correctly, Brian said that she grabbed his arm, or she said that he grabbed his arm. Anyways, the conflicting stories were one said he was being hit in the shoulder and the other one said that his arm was grabbed and that's what caused them to swerve and hit the curb. Something along the lines of that at least. So in your report, you document that Gabby had told you she hit him in the arm, and his statement was that she pulled on the steering wheel. When you asked Brian about the scratches, and he said they must have happened when Gabrielle was trying to get his attention about you being behind him, Gabrielle also said that she was hitting him. So as far as not being consistent, it's really not consistent with what Brian's stating happened, not with what Gabby is saying happened. Response. So you mean Gabby's confusion and emotional state. What else do you recall Gabby being confused about? It didn't seem that she understood while we were there or the way that things could appear from the outside. She was obviously very emotional, crying, not wanting to talk to her mom on the phone. She was on the phone with her mom for the majority of the conversations that we were having. She just didn't seem fully coherent to the world. Not like intoxicated or under the influence, went into the black zone, so to speak. Like the black we have to fight back in law enforcement. You state in your report, I do not believe the situation escalated to the level of a domestic assault as much as that of a mental health crisis. So please explain how you reached this conclusion. With the information I had at hand, and just since what I've heard since then, at the time it seemed like someone had gone into a state and it was more emotional. I don't know what's going on, an overreaction to what they perceive directly in front of them. Just because you have somebody with their hand up doing this doesn't attacking you, but the way that it was being perceived was that they were being attacked. And I think that's what ultimately caused the breakdown that day, with the other fights they had told me about over the last few days or weeks or whatever. With what happened that day, I think that just kind of sent it over the edge for her. And you have to remember, I'm going off of the information that I had that day. That's what it appeared to have been at the time. Well, how would you qualify the two? I was looking at trying to fix the problem and figuring out what the underlying problem was. That day, it didn't seem like it was an ongoing issue of assault, but an ongoing mental health issue that had occurred, and that's what caused the domestic. If this incident was more of a mental health crisis, why did you not get in touch with the mental health professionals? That day was very busy. Calls were stacking up left and right and mistakes were made. It completely slipped my mind. I didn't even think about it. It was the stress of the situation, the stress of everything going on. It wasn't until that I got up that I went. He puts his palm up to his face, slapping it. At any point in that time during your interactions with Gabby, did you ever notice any injuries to Gabby? Right, she had a small scratch on one of her cheeks. And did you ask how she got that? I don't remember. I know that I didn't spend time talking to her. Officer Pratt spent the majority of time talking to her while I was dealing with Brian. Did you ask Brian about the scratch on Gabby's cheek? Again, I don't remember. I do remember something about, I don't know who told it to me. I don't know when I found it out. I know that it was in the time frame of this event, of course, grabbing her face, and that's what he used to push her back by. When you provided dispatch the names and dates of Brian and Gabby from watching the body cam, you only ask about 29s. When you ask about that information, does dispatch typically, if you only ask for 29s, will they let you know about 27 information? Only when it's requested. The first one, you ask about 29 information. They got back to you and said they couldn't find anything, and they couldn't find anybody with his name and date of birth. I wasn't sure if they automatically checked driver's license information as well by the way that they answered. With Gabby, when you collected her information, they came back over the radio and said negative on 29s and unable at 27. With them not being able to find a 27, why did you verify the information? I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I could only speculate as to why. I can tell you this, the driving statuses were not on my highest priority list. I offered my advice and said able to locate 27 information, you either didn't get the right information, whether or not it's them lying to you or you misunderstanding it, not the right, etc. If dispatch is unable to find 27 information and they say they have driver's license, then something is wrong, especially if you're looking for warrants or protective orders. If you don't have the right information, you're not going to be able to find the information if it's there. I've definitely learned a lot since that day. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm guessing you didn't catch when you were collecting her information and you read back some of the letters and you read it back wrong and she didn't hear you read it back. Remember that you collected the last name of Petito rather than Petito? I don't remember that, but I can tell you this, that the earpiece I had at the time was garbage. I couldn't understand everything, and it was really hard to talk to somebody and listen to that because it's required to pay attention to it. It's very possible that I got the wrong information and sent that across, and that could have been the problems behind the 27 and 29 discrepancies. You took several pictures during this incident, most of Brian, and then of both of the driver's license. Why did you not take any pictures of Gabby's injuries? I don't know. Again, like I said, Officer Pratt was taking the majority of the conversation with Petito, and I just made an assumption that he did that. Why did you not upload the photos with the report? Today I still don't know. You don't know why they weren't uploaded? I could have sworn I did. I'm generally good about uploading pictures that I take, and for whatever reason, I missed. Where are those now? They're not on my phone. I look for them and look for them and look for them. Are you aware of policy whether or not it says about using your personal cell phone to take photographs? I check my personal cell phone too. I don't have them on there. I don't delete pictures on my cell phone. So you're issued a department cell phone? Yes. And that's the one you use to take the pictures with? Yes. While checking for injuries on Brian, there appeared to be a large scratch or scar underneath his. Noticed this mark, and if so, what was it? Seen it, I would have addressed it right then and there. Gabby spent the majority of the time inside your patrol vehicle. Is there video and audio of Gabby in your back seat? We don't have in-vehicle video or sound. Video, audio that would have occurred on body cam. Well, what about dash cam? No. You don't have the dash cam, so you don't have video of the driving pattern? We don't have dash cams. You tell Gabby that you have to separate her, and please explain the legal authority you have to separate someone if you don't believe a domestic violence assault has taken place. Originally going to arrest her for domestic violence assault, and I told them that I wanted to separate them so they could cool off. And I mean, me personally, if I get into a combative situation with any outside of work, my first instinct is to just walk away. Because if I'm fighting with somebody, it means that I care. So I'm not going to fight with my wife or my parents or family members or friends for me to walk away, cool off, and regather my thoughts. And then sit down and have a conversation instead of being at each other's throats and screaming, not getting the basic point the argument is about through. My wife has severe anxiety. She takes medication for it, but the medication doesn't protect her from bad days. It just reduces the number of bad days. And there are with her that I can't reason with her in any shape or form. So I have to take a step back, give myself a minute to cool off, and give her a minute to cool off. And after some time, we can back and we can have that conversation. It kind of eliminates that lack of reasonableness that she can come to sometimes. And because they were telling me it had been building up for days or weeks or whatever it was, and they had been on the road for days, weeks, months, whatever it was, I can get how frustrating it can be to be living with somebody so close, and then you have arguments, and then you have nowhere to go. I've got a living room I can go sit and watch TV. I've got a car I can go for a drive and go watch a movie. I've got these things that they didn't have access to. So I told them I wanted them to avoid contact with each other so they had somewhere to go. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to create that option for them. Him in the hotel, her in the van, them not together. You don't have to go somewhere to get that cool-off time. You just have to separate, and that's what I was trying to create for them. Is there any legal authority that you have to separate someone if you don't believe a domestic violence assault occurred? I don't recall. That's not really something to recall. Do you have the legal authority to separate somebody when you don't believe a domestic violence assault occurred? I can't answer that because I don't know. I can't. I don't know off the top of my head right now. So if there's a verbal argument between cohabitants, physical, no crime, do you have the authority to make them separate? Like I said, I'd have to sit down and look that up because I don't know off the top of my head. You tell Brian that Gabby didn't intend to hurt him when she was hitting him, so technically speaking, it does not fit the letter of the code. So please explain how you reached this conclusion. I was Officer Pratt, and he was showing me the code. And in the code, it says with the intent to cause harm, and going off of that, and the direction I was not instructed to take, but another avenue I was given as an option in that scenario. I went with that one because she didn't have the intent to harm him. And with very limited information that I had at the time, there was no sense of deceit from her, trying to lie to us or anything like that. There weren't any signs of there being lies. Did you look, or are you just going off of what you were told? Eric showed me the code. So is that the code for assault or the code for bodily injury? Do you remember? Because you guys talk about both. I don't remember. Have you had any assault charges since? Yes. Have you read the code since? Oh, I was answering your question if I knew which one we were looking at that time. I don't remember what I was looking at that time, but assault does say with the intent to cause bodily injury. At this time, I read Officer Robbins the code for assault, and after reading him the code, I asked if anywhere in the code it said intent. It might have been somewhere else, I'm not sure. He brought it up on his computer in his car. So you haven't looked at it since that incident? You haven't read the assault code? I have. I just handled an assault call a couple of weeks ago. But I've been avoiding the news and stuff like that and putting it far from my mind because I don't want it to dictate how I make my decisions for the future, but I learn from the decisions of that day. At the time of this incident, you were clearly under the impression that assault then was an intent to cause bodily injury. Is that actually how you felt then? Yeah. The decision you made that day, did that decision to benefit yourself or to benefit anybody else? Decision based on what? What's best for the situation? Sometimes it's handcuffs, sometimes it's having an ear for them to listen, to give them to listen. And sometimes it's no action at all, depending on the situation, obviously. I thought that day I was doing the next right thing for that situation. Are you aware of Utah State Code duties to arrest? Yes. When a peace officer responds to a domestic violence call and has probable cause to believe an act of domestic violence has been committed, a peace officer shall arrest without warning or issue to any person that the officer has probable cause to believe has committed an act of domestic violence. At the time of this incident, do you believe you followed the Utah State Code? At the time, I did. Are you aware of anywhere in your policy or Utah State Code to not make an arrest if it is, in fact, a mental health issue or if that is the cause of an issue? Are you aware of anywhere that tells you you don't have to make an arrest because at the time of that event, I was still on FTO. Officer Pratt was my FTO, so I was still following instructions that were bestowed upon me. I hate to make it like I'm throwing him under the bus because I'm not. I made the decision that day, not him, but I was going off of the information that I had available at the time. So when you and Officer Pratt, after reading through the statute and talking about whatever Gabby's answer will, quote, her fate, based on her intent, how would you describe the questioning of Gabby regarding, you remember? Vaguely. You didn't really say anything but you were there. Do you remember the questions asked or the manner in which they were asked? No, I don't. I just remember her being asked about the intent and her denying the intent to hurt him. How does the report approval process work? It goes to the sergeant, which was Assistant Chief Palmer at the time. He reviews it and then he sends it off to our admins. And then I'm not sure where it goes from there. Did you FTO review it at all? Yes. Was there any corrections made prior to sending it up? I'm sure that there were. I still make corrections and submit them. I also remember that it was sent back to me from Assistant Chief Palmer because of wordings and certain things. He wanted me to fix the wording on it. How many call numbers are there? Full-time there are 3, part-time there are 2, and animal control and victim advocate have call signs. Was there any follow-up done with Moonflower? Do they have any video surveillance that would have caught any of this incident? I didn't do any of that follow-up, no. As far as the original 911 caller, did you reach out to him at all? No, I didn't. At the event, I didn't know that our caller was different witness or a different witness. I thought he was our 911 caller. It wasn't until later that our 911 caller was different. And how did you learn that? Another officer. I think it was Officer Pratt that told me that the 911 caller was not. On FatPod, it shows you, the reporting party, tip number and name. Sometimes, if we call out and clear 10-8, they also clear the call, so it eliminates all of that information off of our screens. While you're still on it, you can look at it and see who the caller was and their phone number. Do you remember if you looked at it and seen it? I didn't look at the caller information. The whole time I looked at that screen, I was looking at the license plate number because I saw the vehicle. When the call came across the radio, I started headed that direction, and just as I got towards the north bridge, I saw a van that kind of fit that description from a distance. And so I just scrolled through it to find the license plate number and the license plate state so that I could catch up to the vehicle and confirm or deny whether or not it was the vehicle involved. That is the only time I remember looking at the call comments. I also remember being on the radio and asking them to confirm it while I was trying to find it. So you don't ever recall at the very top of it the name of witness and the phone number. I wasn't looking for it. Is there anything else you can think of that would be important to know that I haven't asked about? One of the main things about this call is I only had 2.5 months experience. I think it was just shy of 2.5 months. I was still on FTO and I had a lot to learn still. I have a lot to learn still to learn today. And I know that I made mistakes that day. I believe I haven't made those same mistakes since. I have learned from this whole ordeal of how something as simple and yet as complicated as a possible domestic violence can blow up a worldwide event. I've gotten better at my report writing. You shouldn't have had so many questions about my report. I know that, and that's exactly what I would have thought read my report from your perspective. Why are there so many questions unanswered in this? And there are discrepancies between body cam and my report, and I recognize that too. And these are the things that are not what occurs as severe as this anymore. When you're on FTO, are you always driving your own vehicle? For the first couple of weeks, I was in a passenger seat. When I completed EVO, because of my academy didn't put me through the EVO, they said it was on the department's responsibility. I switched FTOs from Assistant Chief Palmer to Monte Sergeant Reisenhofer threw me into the driver's seat, but he drove in the passenger seat. That went on for all, and as time went on, Sergeant Reisenhofer, you drive your vehicle. I'll respond to your calls, and you respond to my calls. Basically a team. What if you get called to 2 different calls? It never happened, so I really don't know. I truly believe it would depend on the severity of the call itself. If there was something as an officer information about a traffic collision inside of a parking lot and minor damage, no injuries, I was sent on those myself because it was just filling out people's information and making sure that an exchange did occur. Thank you for watching. If you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing to us now. We would truly appreciate a thumbs up. And until next time, this is Unjustified.